The billionaire's deaf daughter stood alone in the middle of a crowded charity gala, surrounded by hundreds of people who were talking, laughing, and taking photographs, yet not one person noticed that she was silently crying. Then a single father walked across the room, knelt in front of her, and raised his hands. He began signing to her. The girl's tears suddenly stopped. For the first time that afternoon, someone was speaking to her in the language she understood. What nobody knew was that the quiet man working at the event was not simply a struggling single father. He was a former Navy SEAL who had learned sign language years earlier for a reason he had never shared. If you believe kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances can change a person's life, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a meaningful comment, and subscribe to our channel so you can remain part of our family and our community. Eleanor Whitmore had everything people believed could create a perfect life. At 40, she was the founder and CEO of a billion-dollar technology company, owned a magnificent estate, and traveled with a carefully trained security team. Business magazines called her fearless. Investors called her brilliant. Employees knew her as demanding but fair. Yet none of those achievements mattered when she looked at her 14-year-old daughter, Rosalie. Rosalie had been born profoundly deaf. She communicated through American Sign Language, written notes, facial expressions, and the warmth of physical gestures. Eleanor loved her daughter deeply, but she had spent years struggling with guilt. She wondered whether she should have discovered the condition earlier, whether she had worked too much during Rosalie's early childhood, and whether money could somehow compensate for the moments she believed she had missed. Instead of allowing Rosalie to experience life naturally, Eleanor tried to build a world where nothing could hurt her. She hired private tutors, interpreters, therapists, and caregivers. Every public event was carefully planned. Every person who came near Rosalie was investigated. Yet despite all that protection, Rosalie often felt completely alone. The problem was not that people were cruel. It was that most people simply did not know how to communicate with her. At charity events, adults would smile at Rosalie, then immediately turn toward Eleanor and ask questions about her. At restaurants, servers sometimes spoke to Eleanor instead of Rosalie. At business gatherings, children occasionally stared at her hearing aids before walking away. Rosalie learned to smile politely even when she felt invisible. One bright afternoon, Eleanor hosted a large charity event at her company's headquarters to raise money for children with disabilities. The building's enormous glass atrium was filled with guests, reporters, business leaders, and families. Rosalie attended because Eleanor wanted her daughter to experience the community rather than remain isolated at home. Rosalie wore a simple blue dress and stood beside her mother while guests moved around them. Then Eleanor became distracted by a business emergency. A major investor had arrived unexpectedly, and Eleanor's assistant urgently pulled her toward a private meeting area. Rosalie was left with a caregiver. Within minutes, she drifted toward a quiet corner of the atrium. People passed her. Nobody noticed the tears forming in her eyes. Then someone did. His name was Graham Mercer. Graham was 37, a single father raising his 9-year-old daughter, Wren. He worked for a facilities company contracted to maintain the headquarters. He was there that afternoon repairing equipment and assisting with event preparations. To everyone else, Graham looked like an ordinary maintenance worker. But Graham had lived another life. Before becoming a single father, he had served as a Navy SEAL. During his military career, he had worked alongside people from many backgrounds and learned how important communication could be when noise was impossible or dangerous. During one assignment, he had become close to a teammate whose daughter was deaf. Graham had learned American Sign Language so he could communicate with the child during visits. That small decision had stayed with him long after his military career ended. Now, when he noticed Rosalie standing alone, he recognized the signs immediately. She was not simply bored. She was overwhelmed. Graham walked toward her slowly and stopped several feet away so he would not frighten her. Then he raised his hands and began signing. Rosalie stared at him. Her expression changed instantly. She signed back. Graham answered. For several minutes, the crowded atrium disappeared around them. Rosalie smiled. Graham smiled too. He did not treat her like someone who needed rescuing. He simply communicated with her. A few guests began noticing. Then Eleanor returned. She stopped in her tracks when she saw her daughter laughing with the maintenance worker. The sight stunned her. Rosalie had spent years becoming uncomfortable around strangers, yet this man had earned her trust in minutes. Eleanor immediately wanted to know who he was. When she discovered Graham's military background, her protective instincts returned. She had security investigate him. The report revealed that Graham had served in elite military units and had received commendations for his service. It also revealed that he was a single father. But there was something else in the report. Graham had left the military after an operation that had deeply affected him. Several members of his team had been injured, and one of his closest friends had never returned home. Graham had struggled afterward, but instead of allowing the experience to destroy him, he devoted himself to raising Ren and building a quieter life. Eleanor remained suspicious. She did not understand why a former Navy SEAL working as a maintenance employee would take such an interest in her daughter. Graham never gave her a reason to distrust him. He simply kept treating Rosalie with respect. Over the following weeks, Rosalie began seeking him out whenever she visited the headquarters. Graham taught her small practical skills, helped her become more confident around strangers, and encouraged her to communicate with people instead of withdrawing whenever they failed to understand her. He also encouraged Ren to learn sign language. Soon the two girls were signing together. Rosalie's world began expanding. She started making friends. She became more confident. She even began helping other children learn basic signs. Eleanor watched the transformation with mixed emotions. She was grateful, but she was also uncomfortable. For years she had believed that money and protection were the best gifts she could give her daughter. Graham was showing her something different. Sometimes the greatest gift was simply being understood. Then the conflict arrived. A senior executive at Eleanor's company complained that Graham was spending too much time around Rosalie. He suggested that the billionaire's daughter should only interact with professionals and warned Eleanor that the situation could create a security problem. Eleanor panicked. She told Graham that he needed to keep his distance. Graham accepted the decision without anger. He stepped away. Rosalie immediately noticed. She became quiet again. She stopped attending social events. She stopped signing with Ren. Most painfully, she began believing that perhaps there was something wrong with her that made people leave. Eleanor saw her daughter's confidence disappear and finally understood what her fear had done. She had spent years trying to protect Rosalie from rejection, but now she was teaching her that relationships could vanish whenever someone became afraid. Before Eleanor could repair the damage, another crisis occurred. During a daytime family event at the company's outdoor courtyard, a temporary lighting structure became unstable after a support cable snapped. Several children were standing nearby, including Rosalie and Ren. The structure began to fall. People panicked. Graham reacted instantly. His Navy SEAL training took over. He moved through the crowd, directing people away from the danger and creating a clear path. He reached the children and used calm hand signals to guide Rosalie and Ren toward safety. Rosalie understood immediately. She followed him. The structure crashed moments later. Nobody was seriously injured. Eleanor stood frozen. She had just watched the man she had pushed away protect her daughter without hesitation. But what moved her most was not Graham's military skill. It was the way he communicated with Rosalie during the emergency. He did not shout. He did not grab her. He trusted her ability to understand. He gave her information in the language she knew. After the danger passed, Eleanor approached Graham and finally apologized. She admitted that she had been afraid. Not of him. Of losing her daughter. Graham understood. He had spent years fearing loss too. He told her through a simple handwritten note that love could not eliminate fear, but it could prevent fear from controlling every decision. Eleanor cried. For the first time, she realized that Rosalie did not need a mother who could control the entire world. She needed a mother who would stand beside her while she learned to navigate it. Everything began changing after that. Eleanor expanded her company's accessibility programs. She hired deaf employees, provided professional interpreters at major events, and created scholarships for children who needed hearing-related education and technology. Rosalie became one of the strongest advocates for the program. Graham volunteered to help teach basic sign language to employees and families. Wren joined him. The headquarters gradually became a place where Rosalie no longer felt invisible. One afternoon, months later, Eleanor stood outside the company's community center and watched Rosalie lead a group of children through a sign language activity. Her daughter was confident. Happy. Independent. Graham stood nearby with Wren, watching proudly. Eleanor realized that the man who had entered their lives as a maintenance worker had given her something priceless. He had not fixed Rosalie. Rosalie had never been broken. He had simply helped other people learn how to see her. Before we reach the ending, please leave a meaningful comment telling us what you believe was the most powerful lesson in Rosalie's journey. Was it that kindness begins with listening, that communication is more than words, or that sometimes people do not need to be rescued, they simply need to be understood? Your comment could encourage someone in our community who feels invisible or misunderstood. Several months later, Eleanor stood beside Rosalie at a community celebration. The girl who once stood alone in crowded rooms was now surrounded by friends. She looked toward Graham and raised her hands. He answered with a smile. Eleanor watched them and finally understood the greatest lesson of her life. She had spent billions trying to create a safer world for her daughter. Graham had changed Rosalie's world without spending a single dollar. He had given her something money could never purchase. A voice. Not a spoken voice. A voice through her hands, her confidence, her friendships, and her belief that she belonged. Graham had once been trained as a Navy SEAL to operate in silence, where every movement could carry meaning and every mistake could cost a life. But the most important communication he ever learned was not taught by the military. It was learned through kindness. He had looked at a deaf girl whom everyone else overlooked and simply decided to speak her language. And because he did, she finally understood something she had been waiting years to hear. She mattered. Her mother mattered. Her voice mattered. Her future mattered. Sometimes changing someone's life does not require wealth, power, or extraordinary words. Sometimes it only requires noticing the person everyone else ignored. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey.